Now we come to the AGS Honors and Awards ceremony. Ladies and gentlemen, please remain seated and welcome again the President of the American Geographical Society, Dr. Marie Price.
Thank you, John, Professor Blowers, Professor Hecht, and Mr. Frazier, and Mrs. Melamid. Distinguished participants of the American Geographical Fall Symposium, AGS counselors and fellows, faculty, and friends of Columbia University, honored guests. We are pleased that you're joining us this afternoon for the presentation of 2 American Geographical Society medals and 1 honorary fellowship. And as president, I get the wonderful opportunity each year to celebrate excellence and share with you the accomplishments of our wonderful medalists and honorees. The medals include the Alexander and Elsie Melamed Medal for distinguished work on the dynamic relationship between human culture and natural resources, to be presented to Professor Andrew Blowers, and the David Livingstone Centenary Medal for scientific achievement in the field of geography of the Southern Hemisphere, to be awarded to Professor Susanna Hecht. The honorary fellowship will be bestowed to Mr. Ian Frazier. The Society awarded its first medal in 1896. Since then, 9 medals have been created, and nearly 200 people have received this honor. Harkening back to another era, the medals were created to recognize excellence and were awarded to individuals who expanded geographic knowledge through research and exploration, pioneered new geographic technology, and used geographical thinking to influence policy. Many medalists are from the United States, but over half are from other countries such as Brazil, China, the United Kingdom, France, Mongolia, Germany, and Canada. Through the awarding of medals, AGS has recognized astronauts, explorers, cartographers, inventors, researchers, and world leaders. Today we award 2 medals. The David Livingstone Centenary Medal was created over a century ago to honor Livingstone's accomplishments as an explorer, missionary, and staunch abolitionist, who focused his geographical talents on the African continent. Livingstone was an early member of the American Geographical Society and reported his discoveries to the Society. Prior recipients include explorers and academics who work in the Southern Hemisphere. The first recipient was Sir Douglas Mawson, an Australian Antarctic explorer. Theodore Roosevelt received the medal in 1917 for his Amazonian exploration, Isaiah Bowman for his pioneering work in the Andes, Dr. Akin Mogugunju for his work in Nigeria, and the last recipient in 2001 was Dr. Bertha Becker, a leader in Brazilian geography. The second medal will be presented is the Alexander and Elsie Melamed Medal, our newest honor created in 2002. It was established by a gift from Elsie Melamed, who also designed the medal and is with us today. Elsie, will you please stand so we can thank you for the medal you've supposed and your support to the Society. Her husband, Alex Melamed, served on the AGS Council for a quarter century, and he worked extensively in the Middle East. This award honors outstanding work on the dynamic relationships between human societies and the natural world. We are fortunate to have past 2 recipients of this medal with us today as well, our program chair, Mike Pasqualetti, and the recent session panelist, Dr. Diana Liverman. The American Geographical Society also bestows honorary fellowships to individuals who have made significant contributions to the field of geography broadly conceived. Recent past recipients include Barbara Ryan, Jeffrey Sachs, Dava Sobel, Harm de Blai, and Daniel Bernstein. Honorary fellowships go back to the earliest years of the Society in the 1850s. The first award will be the Honorary Fellowship, I now ask that Mr. Ian Frazier join me and call upon Dr. Deborah Popper, a recipient of the Voris Medal and now chair of the AGS Honors Committee, and Dr. Chris Tucker, the chairman of AGS, to join us as Deborah will read the citations.
Good afternoon. It's a privilege for me, as chair of the AGS Honors and Awards Committee, to read the citation for the AGS Honorary Fellowship. So let me begin. As a writer, Ian Frazier has had a long and successful career exploring the world with a geographer's eye and a lucid pen. One of his earliest successes was the Great Plains, which dropped the reader down in flyover country, making a too often neglected part of the country a place to care about. He followed that with On the Res, bringing further insights into the Great Plains and especially the Lakota people and the Pine Ridge Reservation. For his next book, he traveled to Siberia to explore life there, given its geographical, historical, and cultural constraints. He quickly conveyed its scale and its challenges. Frazier has written regularly for magazines like The New Yorker, Harper's, and The Atlantic Monthly. His articles on post-Sandy Staten Island took a particularly vulnerable place, only getting more so in a climate change world, and did an excellent job of explaining how this non-iconic place, one any of us could live in, could approach its challenges. His recent New Yorker piece takes on another hazard, grass fires in the Great Plains, which seem likely to increase in number and severity. Frazier walks us through some of Panhandle, Oklahoma, and western Kansas, introducing us to the causes and concerns of the grass fires and how the community responded. Frazier is an observer of place and people and how they fit together, and he manages to convey what he finds with humor and grace. Carlo Rotella, reviewing his 2016 book of essays, Hogs Wild, for the New York Times, conveys this sense and why AGS would want to make him an honorary fellow. Ian Frazier is a prolific exponent of the reported essay and related forms. His work has been pigeonholed in various ways: humor, travel, memoir, essay. But in general, it tends to favor legs over navel and to present the reader with a consistent persona, an observant, decent, ecstatically modest guy from Hudson, Ohio, who hears the call of the wild from both nature and the city. A sure-footed storyteller enjoying his own virtuosity without showing off too much. He's attuned to pain and absurdity, but fundamentally approves of and takes pleasure in humans and other animals, landscapes of all kinds, and many of the countless signifying shapes the world can take. He's the recipient of the Whiting, March, Sidney, and Thurber Awards. For the many ways and times Frazier has taken us on the road with him, near and far, and brought geography to a broad audience who swallow his insights, leavened by his wit, and are thus primed for the drier stuff of academics and technocrats, we make him an honorary fellow of the American Geographical Society. So therefore, for these reasons and more, on behalf of its grateful members, worldwide scholars, and all who recognize the importance of excellence in geographical research and exploration, the American Geographical Society honors Mr. Ian Frazier by presenting him with an honorary American Geographical Society Fellowship on this 16th day of November in the year 2018 in New York City. Congratulations, Sandy. Okay. So now it is my distinct honor to read the citation for the Alexander and Ilse Melamed Medal. Now, the Alexander and Ilse Melamed Medal recognizes those who have significantly improved our understanding of the dynamic relationship between human culture and natural resources. Today, we present this medal to Andrew Blowers, and as his nomination stated, he personifies and I quote, how geographers can meaningfully dedicate their lives simultaneously to education, public service, and our understanding of the complex dance that is often the hallmark of the interactions between energy and humankind. His contributions have been as broad as they have been deep in the application of geographic principles to energy planning and public policy. Professor Blowers has devoted his life to the most compelling and confounding task, controlling and containing nuclear materials, a need critical to human, in truth, all species, safety. Among his 17 books are The International Politics of Nuclear Waste, Nuclear Power in Crisis, Planning for a Sustainable Environment, and The Legacy of Nuclear Power. Professor Blowers has been an educational innovator. He was one of the pioneer academics who helped set up Britain's Open University in 1970, where over the next decades, he held positions as Professor of Social Sciences, Dean of the Faculty of Social Sciences, and Pro-Vice Chancellor. His contributions to his communities, local, national, and global, have been inspirational. For almost 30 years, Professor Blowers was a counselor on Bedfordshire County Council. He chaired its Environment Committee, led the labor group, and spearheaded its successful fight against a proposal for a nearby low-level radioactive waste dump. At the national level, he served on committees on radioactive waste, the Radioactive Waste Management Committee, and the first Committee on Radioactive Waste Management, whose recommendations on disposal of nuclear waste the British government adopted. He was the government-appointed non-executive director of NIREX, the company formerly responsible for the management of the country's radioactive waste. He regularly contributes his expertise to the House of Commons Environment, Food, and Rural Affairs Committee and the Energy and Climate Change Committee. He is a member of the government's Community Representation Working Group, which was set up to work out how to achieve democratic participation in the voluntary siting process for a deep disposal facility for Britain's radioactive wastes. He is chair of Blackwater Against New Nuclear Group and also co-chair of the Department of Energy and Climate Change NGO Nuclear Forum, which brings together government and NGOs, both national and local. The American Geographical Society is not the first to recognize Professor Blowers' contributions. Queen Elizabeth recognized Blowers in 2000 with an OBE for services to environmental protection. In 2004, he became a Fellow of the Royal Society of Arts, and that year was awarded an Honorary Doctor of Literature by De Montfort University. We applaud the tireless work on behalf of all of us on the planet. Therefore, for these reasons and more, on behalf of the grateful members, worldwide scholars, and all who recognize the importance of excellence in geographical research and exploration, the American Geographical Society honors Professor Andrew Blowers by presenting him with the Alexander and Ilse Melamed Medal for distinguished work on the dynamic relationship between human culture and natural resources on this 16th day of November in the year 2018 in New York City. Congratulations, Andy. Okay, and now we get to do more, to listen to you. Would you like to say a few words, please?
Well, Madam President, Mr. Chairman, and particularly could I say to Ilse, who is here, I understand. I have not yet met her, but this is a beautiful looking piece of work, and I know that you designed it, and I should be very proud to own it. I give my heartfelt thanks really for this honor, which is a privilege, but very much to me a surprise. I can only just accept it in those terms and thank all of those who put forward the idea. It's for relations between human cultures and natural resources. And I suppose looking back over my life, that's what I've been doing. I did postgraduate work on the built environment and its relationship from housing and people. I worked for a long time on planning, development and conservation. I wrote a lot of stuff on pollution, politics and power. And the last half of my career I have devoted, as was said, to issues to do with nuclear power and particularly nuclear waste. But I was wondering what to say to this sort of audience. I don't want to give a lecture, there's not time for that. So I thought, well, this is a geography audience, and so perhaps I should say something about geography, because I am a geographer, although I've strayed from the path. Much of my career has been in interdisciplinary social sciences. My chair is in social sciences, particularly issues of society and politics. But the truth is, I discover I've never really left geography, because it's not so much a discipline, it's more a way of life. It's a perspective, a dimension. One tends to think in spatial terms, as indeed if you read history, and that's the other subject I know, you tend to think in temporal terms. And these two cross-cutting perspectives have basically framed the way that I think and apply myself to knowledge. And in terms of, but I believe that not to be a geographer, in my case, is not to be. That's not necessarily a good thing, because it can be quite constraining if all the time you're just working within these dimensions. But in my academic career, I was very fortunate to work with the Open University and to be able to apply geography in an interdisciplinary context in a whole series of ways in courses that were very innovative, such as the courses that I actually developed and ran in patterns of inequality and environment, truly interdisciplinary fields. But I should say that for me, just being an academic was not sufficient. An academic needs, I think, in my case, more. On the headstone of Karl Marx in Highgate Cemetery, some of you will know is the quotation, "The philosophers have only interpreted the world in various ways. The point is to change it." And I suppose I became motivated to try and change things, not merely through trying to understand and interpret through geography, but also through political action. And I did become a politician, and my main purposes were the issues of inequality, democracy, and power relations, which I've applied in environmental planning and policy contexts. And as a politician, as you've heard, I've worked with government, I've worked in local politics, and in terms of government advice and so on. But what do you do if you want to be active in environment is your field? You spend time in the noble practice of stopping things. And that's what good environmentalism to me is about. For example, stopping road developments, making sure that housing development is commensurate with the environment, and trying to prevent, in my case, I feel quite a mission in this, trying to prevent further nuclear energy, as well as other things. And the nuclear issue has given me journeys to many places. I just mentioned two briefly. One is in your country. It is Hanford, up in Washington State, which I found, using an overused American adjective, I found truly awesome. It is a fundamentally deep and exciting experience to go to Hanford and to realize what was created there in the years of the Second World War, producing basically plutonium that eventually was used in the bomb on Nagasaki. And somebody said to me there, talking about the people who worked on that project, nothing could make them so proud ever again. And you need to get into the thought processes and culture of landscapes such as this to truly understand people and places. The other places in my own country, Sellafield, you may have heard of it, the most polluted radioactive site in the UK. I shall wear the medal, but at the moment I'm wearing this badge, which I got in 1980, which says, "I've been to Sellafield." I don't know whether you can quite appreciate what that means, but I've been to Sellafield in the 1980s was about you being one of the most horrendous places on earth. I found it quite useful when traveling on the underground trains in London because I was immediately given a seat wearing this badge. Nowadays I get a seat quite easily because I'm old enough for people to stand up for me. But that brings me lastly to this question of the nuclear industry, why I am so dedicated to that. And that is because, and this conference has hinted at it, although nuclear has played very little part in this conference, but it's hinted at it, that nuclear energy is part of the solution to climate change. That's what we are told. It's almost as if it is a moral necessity. I would say to you, and the very reverse is true, that nuclear energy and its connections is a moral issue in its own right, because it is able to present a global dangers in very much in a context which is immediate rather than long-term, like climate change. Now, I just quote Ulrich Beck. Ulrich Beck, a great sociologist who died 2 or 3 years ago, who was the protagonist of the Risk Society. And he was talking about the impact of the nuclear. And he said, "But the effect only exists when it occurs. And when it occurs, it no longer exists because nothing exists anymore." And that threat still is here, and I think we need to recognize it. Anyway, I just will close by saying it has been a long and fascinating journey, and I've had, in a sense, several different careers. But they have been unified by being a geographer, as I now recognize, and I proudly will respect the medal from a geographical institution. I just mentioned 2 people who've helped me in this journey. One is Professor Peter Leroy, a Belgian colleague with whom I worked for some years, developing a theory which pervades the book that I've written. There's a flyer for it in your packs. I very much enjoyed that academic partnership. The other is the chairman of this conference, Martin, isn't it? Mike Pasqualetti, who has been a long-standing friend, a great inspiration, and a great person to encourage. And his work, I think, on energy landscapes is quite seminal and thoughtful, and I'd like to thank him very much, and he's obviously produced a very good conference here today. And last, but obviously not least, the 2 people who've been on this journey with me, my first wife who died many years ago, and above all, Vary, my present wife, with whom I continue to travel. We continue to work together in fighting a particular power station in the county of Essex. Without any more ado, and thanks to everybody here, and thank you very much to the Society, I'm delighted to accept this award. Thank you.
And again, congratulations. Now I invite Professor Susanna Hecht to join us on stage. Okay, and now it is my distinct honor to read the citation for the David Livingstone Centenary Medal. In March 1913, at the initiative of the Hispanic Society of America, the American Geographical Society created the David Livingstone Centenary Medal on the centenary of Livingstone's birth to reward scientific achievement in the field of geography of the Southern Hemisphere. Today we award the medal to Dr. Susanna Hecht, Professor of Urban Planning and Geography at UCLA and at the Graduate Institute of International Development in Switzerland, for her exceptional research on Amazonia. The region is central to the planet's health, yet geographically and socially distant from power centers. Working effectively in such a setting calls for dedication, sensitivity, and acuity, which is what Dr. Hecht has brought to it. She has tracked Amazonia's land uses, carefully identifying how nature, economics, development, and people intersect. Her work has made use of a challenging mix of research skills and sources that include remote sensing, paleontological data, archival work, national censuses, and sharp on-the-ground observation. She has a deeply sophisticated comprehension of deforestation, how it interacts with migration, the ecosystem, and the possibilities of alternative economies. She takes environmental history's long view of change and combines it with a detailed technical focus to understand how particular tropical crops fare in different settings. Her studies of responses to deforestation have led her to explore the possibilities for non-timber forest products and how they might connect with new institutions, traditional peoples, gender relations, and social movements. She has pushed forward methodological boundaries and is one of the founders of the field of political ecology. Her research has received support from the National Science Foundation, NASA, the MacArthur, Guggenheim, and Ford Foundations, the Institute of Advanced Studies, among many, many others. Dr. Hecht's major monographs include The Fate of the Forest, Destroyers, Developers, and Defenders of the Amazon, and The Scrabble for the Amazon and the Lost Paradise of Euclides da Cunha. And she co-edited The Social Life of Forests, Past, Present, and Future of Woodland Resurgence. The Scrabble for the Amazon won the American Historical Association's Best Book in Environmental History Award in 2015, and The Fate of the Forest won multiple awards. She's written dozens of technical monographs and more than 100 refereed articles and book chapters. She has been sought after as a collaborator and as an advisor. She has worked with and written with a wide range of academics across fields and countries, and she has consulted for governmental and non-governmental agencies, including the World Bank, the Inter-American Development Bank, Rainforest Alliance, Amazon Watch, USAID, Brazil, Sudan, and many more. We salute Dr. Hecht for the complexity and depth of her contributions to the study of the Global South. Therefore, for these reasons and more, on behalf of its grateful members, worldwide scholars, and all who recognize the importance of excellence in geographical research and exploration, the American Geographical Society honors Professor Susanna Hecht by presenting her with the David Livingstone Centenary Medal for scientific achievement in the field of geography of the Southern Hemisphere on this 16th day of November in the year 2018 in New York City. Congratulations, Susanna. And thank you, and please come say some words for us.
Well, first of all, I'd like to thank the American Geographical Society for its generous support of geographic thought and thinking geography into the future, which it's doing as we speak, however long that future might be. The other thing that I think is really important is its interdisciplinary focus and its generosity in terms of looking at the solutions from many different perspectives and many different kinds of ideologies about development. I'm an Amazon specialist, as you might have heard, and so this award has special meaning to me because of the distinguished Amazonian scholars who have shared it before me. So one of these is Teddy Roosevelt, who sort of lost his life practically on the traveling with another recipient who was extremely important in Brazilian history, which is Cândido Rondon. He was a half-Indian military surveyor and a positivist, and also a very good friend of my protagonist of one of my books, Euclides da Cunha. So he was the person who integrated Amazonia through technology and through leapfrogging technology, which was the use of telegraphs before even roads, planes, or anything, as a means of knitting a nation together. So in this sense, he perhaps might be our muse in this particular conference about how one can go ahead before the roads are built. The other person who's extremely important to me in this, and a person I knew personally, was Berta Becker, who worked also on the geopolitics of Amazonia, who has been and who was an activist and an important personage in the development of geography in Brazil. So the meaningfulness of this medal is, I can't really describe to you my emotion, because it comes, I stand in a company for whom I have nothing but immense admiration. On that note, I'm going to move into a few remarks. They might be a little bit too lighthearted for the solemnity of the occasion, but those of us who almost had our houses burned down in the recent fires find ourselves a little bit giddy. So on that note, one of the things I would like to do is to quote a very famous line from a very famous Los Angeles film. And that film, of course, for which you are all aware, is A Touch of Evil, the Orson Welles film. Now in that, there's a moment Orson Welles is about to go and get shot, and he goes to a fortune teller who happens to be Marlene Dietrich. And he asks Marlene, "Fortune teller, read my future." And she turns to him and says this line, "Future, you have no future. Your future is all used up." Now, we personally would not like to hear that. And so it's in this light that we really need to be thinking about the kinds of information that's being promulgated and being expressed in this particular conference. So one of the things also I think needs to be emphasized is that most of the environmental questions will be reflected in environmental and climate justice questions that don't maybe occur in New York City or even in Los Angeles, but rather take place in places like the Amazon, where actually, of course, the questions of deforestation, the questions of water rise, the tipping points of these environments are nothing but urgent. It's also important to realize that as we look at the destruction around us, from Hurricane Michael, from the recent level 5 monsoons in the South Pacific, to the raging fires that still are burning in California, we need to really start to rethink, in fact, how we are going to rebuild our society. In this sense, we can look to people like Teddy Roosevelt, we can look to people like FDR, who confronted with major challenges, and particularly FDR, who was dealing with the climate change associated with the Dust Bowl, was eager to come up with ways that worked both at the community level and really mobilized the state, it mobilized science, and also new institutions and new ideas about what social justice might look like. So in this sense, we might take a few lessons from the Dust Bowl and to think about how we're going to have to transform our institutions and what adaptation might look like, not just in the places that we are now confronting that have been completely devastated, although those are interesting questions. What might paradise look like? A reasonable question. But also, I ask you to use that famous question about that Rawls posed as his veil of ignorance. And there was a very interesting op-ed that said, if there was reincarnation, how would you organize the world using Rawls' idea? And the idea of Rawls is this, which is if you don't know where your social status will be, how would you construct the world? Now, if you were going to do that in a world of reincarnation, where the probability would be that you would be a woman in a hot place and one that got periodic delusions, not delusions, deluges, how would you organize? What kind of policies? What would you do? So in this sense, that is the question about if you will, how you would rebuild paradise. So in this sense, we are always confronted with a kind of great challenge, and of course, at this time, we confront the greatest one of all. Well, since we already had Karl Marx, I have to like throw that particular quote out, but I'll go with Lenin instead, which is, as he actually put it, we may not want to talk to the future now, but the future will want to talk to us. And so, of course, it's important to keep this in mind as well. I'm not going to go on. I could talk to you about the role of the tropics, that its emissions are equal to all the cars, buses, forms of transportation, and thus coming up with solutions that keep forests standing while providing decent livelihoods remains one of the central questions for the 21st century. And unfortunately, we live in a world where we have a lot of denialists, and it's one thing to deny payments to porn stars, it's another to deny the laws of physics. So in this sense, I think we need to sort of go forward and keep these ideas very strongly in mind. And the other thing, since I've just said going forward, I'd like to really talk to and reiterate the words of David Livingstone, whom I called Stanley Livingstone for a long time because I thought, well, it's Stanley and Livingstone, so it was like this convergence of a person into one exciting colonial moment. But one of the things is that what he discussed was, if you have men who will only come if there is a good road, I do not want them. I want men who will come if there is no road at all. And in this sense, we can think of Rondon, who integrated through a new technology a place that it was, how to describe it, at the ends of the world and beginnings of time in the understanding of most people in the world. But the other thing that he said, which I think is really perhaps one of the most important things that we can keep in mind, I will go anywhere as long as it is forward. So thank you very much, and thank you so much for this award.